Okay, so we're going to jump right into the material. We have a lot to get through today. A lot of theoretical, philosophical ideas that I want to present today, which I hope will bring together some of the things that we've discussed over the past few weeks. Just to recap where we left off last time. So we talked about Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow, and he talked about identifying activities that have the right skill level compared to the task difficulty. That's when we experience flow. If it is too easy, we experience boredom. If it's too hard, too difficult, we experience anxiety. Ideally, what we want to do is find activities that are right on, or maybe stretch us a little bit beyond our comfort level. Not too much so that we feel anxious, remember the panic zone, but not too little so that we feel boredom. And we started talking about flow as a compass, telling us when we're doing things that are too easy. What do we do about it? Well, then we should raise the challenge. And within this context of too easy, I brought up the idea of the underprivilege of privilege. I want to elaborate a little bit more on that. One of the things that we see, especially among people who have been raised in privileged homes, or they feel like they have had a privileged life, is that they experience the pressure to be happy. The reason why they experience it, and the reason why they take away the permission that they have to experience negative emotions at times, is because they say to themselves, what right do I have to be unhappy? I'm here at Harvard. I had a relatively privileged upbringing. Things are going well for me. What right do I have to be unhappy? And what happens as a result of this question is that on top of the pain associated with negative emotions, there's also guilt about feeling the way we feel, and also feeling of inadequacy. After all, I have every reason in the world to be happy, and then you can list those reasons. And I'm still unhappy, I still experience sadness at times. There must be something wrong with me, is the conclusion. What we need to recognize, again, regardless of the background we come from, whether it is privileged or not privileged, financially speaking, when it comes to the ultimate currency, which is measured in emotions, to happiness, we're all equal. We are all born equal. Yes, some people are born with more predisposition for happiness than others. But as we talked about before, other than extreme circumstances, the external matters very little. Emotions, the ultimate currency, is the great equalizer. There are implications to this understanding. And the first implication is that we need to give ourselves the permission to be human. You see, we cannot protect ourselves or others from experiencing negative emotions. Even the happiest people in the world experience negative emotions. The question is, what do we do with these emotions? Do we try to fight them, or do we first accept them and then ask ourselves, how can I overcome these emotions? And this is important because imagine this. Imagine that you didn't accept the law of gravity. Right? You woke up in the morning and you said, why can't I fly to class? Every morning you woke up and said that. What you would experience is frustration and unhappiness, not accepting the law of gravity as natural. Similarly, we're doing the exact same thing to ourselves when we say, why am I unhappy? Why am I feeling sad? And then you list all the reasons why you shouldn't. Well, why are you feeling sad? Why are you feeling unhappy? Because you're a human being. And if we don't accept that, we will experience the same negative consequences that we would experience if we didn't accept the law of gravity. Unhappiness, disappointment, frustration. Again, emotions are the great equalizer. That we experience negative emotions is inevitable. The question is, what do we do with them? As a first step, as you know, what I suggest is giving ourselves the permission to be human. Let me move on to the other part of flow now. So we talked about what happens when things are too easy, right? Hello Kitty for second grade. But let's move over now to what if what we're doing is overwhelming, anxiety-inducing? What do we do? One of the things to do with our goals, ideally self-concordant goals, is to divide and conquer. For example, I now conduct 5-day workshops for executives in organizations. Had I started off thinking I want to conduct 5-day workshops, it would have been too overwhelming. Rather, what I did was first give a 20-minute presentation. I told you to my roommates, later to the squash team, then built it up to a 50-minute lecture, and gradually build it up to a 5-day or a whole course. Had I thought about it in the context of teaching a whole course from the outset, or 2 courses, it would have been overwhelming. But I divided and conquered into single lectures. I can't. Yeah, you can't take pictures of the students. Yeah, sorry. How different this is, right? We had a photographer who didn't listen to me. He just went on and on. Sorry. Sorry. No, it's good. Okay. So where were we? Think about another goal, long-term goal that we have, to set goals, to get fit. One way to go about it, you say, I'm going to run 10 miles tomorrow. Overwhelming, difficult, seems insurmountable. On the other hand, if we divide and conquer, we say, okay, tomorrow I'll start by walking 2 miles, and then gradually building on that. There's actually research on this, and one of the people who understood this research implicitly, I'm not sure he read it, was Pat Riley, the legendary LA Lakers coach. Most of you probably don't remember, but back in 1986, the Boston Celtics, with Larry Bird, McHale, defeated the Los Angeles Lakers handily. They beat them very comfortably in the playoffs. After the games, the LA Lakers players not only felt defeated, but they didn't really think they could overcome the legendary Celtics team of the 80s. But Pat Riley thought differently, and here is what he did. And many people attribute the success of the Lakers to this particular action. Here is what he did. He said, look, we're not going to think about how good the Celtics are, how great they are. We're going to think about ourselves. We want to win the world championships. And here is how we're going to do it. We're going to improve every area of our game by 1%, whether it's ball control, free throw shots, defense, by 1% only. And that suddenly felt manageable to the players. And that's what they did. They worked on each area to improve it just that 1%. They won the following year's NBA, and they won it back-to-back the year after. And again, many people, including Pat Riley himself, attribute it to this divide and conquer. And there's actual research on it. Research done by Professor Ellen Langer from here. And here is what she did. She brought 2 groups of people. And she asked them to look at performances by great scientists, inventions of great scientists. And the 2 groups were different in the following way. The first group came in and looked at the invention, looked at the performance of the scientist. And they were asked to evaluate these scientists. And here is how they evaluated them. Great, basically superhuman. Their goals are unattainable, out of the subject's reach. And then the second group, again randomly divided into 2 groups, evaluated differently. What they did, or what Professor Langer did, was show the group the steps that these scientists took in order to get to their invention. Their failures on their way, the time that it took them, the experiences that they had on their way to achieving that goal. And then they had to evaluate these same scientists and these same inventions. These students evaluated them radically different. They perceived them as human. They perceived their inventions as attainable. They could actually see themselves in the scientists' shoes, not as superhuman individuals, but as fully human researchers. That's important because what did they do? Professor Langer divided and conquered in the perception of people of these inventions, and once she divided and conquered, suddenly it became attainable. In her words, people can imagine themselves taking steps while great heights seem entirely forbidden. Every great achievement throughout history was a 1,000-mile journey. It was not just one step. And our goal, when we set goals for ourselves, is to divide and conquer, because that's when it will seem to us will be attainable. Whereas if we just look at the end result, it will seem out of our reach. Remember the study by Shelley Taylor from UCLA about goal setting, where she said if we just imagine the outcome, it's not as good as if we imagine the steps that we need to take in order to reach this outcome. And students were doing it when they were preparing for an exam. Divide and conquer. This is also why I insist on biographies being the best self-help books. Because in good biographies, you don't just see these are the 5 steps to happiness, or to success, or to greatness, but you actually see a person's life, the vicissitudes, the ups and downs. You realize that you either learn to fail or you fail to learn. You realize that it's no coincidence that the most successful people in history are also the people who have failed the most times. And then it becomes attainable. Then it becomes achievable. Another important characteristic that is necessary for the experience of flow, of both satisfaction and performance while carrying out an activity, is that we have a clear sense of direction. Remember what goals do. Long-term goals are means rather than ends. They are means that liberate us to enjoy the end, which is the here and now, the present, the gift that we have. We get immediate feedback, and that leads to flow. This is why we experience so much flow when we play music or when we do sports. It's engaging. We're always engaged, and we're always being engaged by the experience itself. Not by the external, but by the experience itself for its own sake. Also, what research has shown by Claypool and Kanjami is that if we write our goals, if we actually write the plan down, we're much more likely to achieve it. Why? Because think about it. When we write it down, it's like taking our knapsack and throwing it over the wall. It's making this commitment. It's saying, I have no choice, I have to get there. And our mind doesn't like when there is inconsistency between what is inside and what is outside. And then we're much more likely to achieve it. Also, goals have to be specific. It's not enough to say, I want to be happier. That's general. That's not concrete. So how do we concretize things? For example, I want to speak up in class on Thursday. The following week, I want to speak up in 3 of my sections. That's concrete. That's measurable. Also, in terms of a timeline, by when? It's not I want to improve sales soonish, but rather I want to improve sales by 5% by the January 1st, 2007. Or I want to improve dribbling and free throw by 1% by the beginning of the season next year. Finally, this is for my wife, Tammy. she suggested that instead of deadlines, we call them lifelines. Much more appropriate, and since we talked a lot about the power of priming and the importance of words, I think this is much more appropriate. Why is it more appropriate? Because lifelines, or because goals are lifelines. What do? As we talked about, they inspire, they put the spirit in us. If we have a goal, a self-concordant goal, something that we really, really want to achieve, it makes us more motivated. What it does, it's life-enhancing. Here is a beautiful excerpt from Sir Walter Scott. Sound, sound the clarion, fill the fife. To all the sensual world proclaim, one crowded hour of glorious life is worth an age without a name. That's what we experience when we have self-concordant goals. That's what we experience when we feel that what we're doing is our calling rather than a job or a career. And remember about the trickle effect. 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week of self-concordant goals can influence our entire week, can make us more successful and happier, whatever we do outside of these goals, of the attainment of our calling. One of the things that you'll do for your response papers after spring break is actually set goals and make these goals concrete. If you want to improve your health, set a concrete goal. I'm going to be running 5 miles 3 times a week by the 1st of January 2007, or whatever. Make it concrete, make it real. So we know how important goals are. We know that it contributes to our well-being, to happiness, and we know that it contributes also to our success, to our performance. But then there are some brick walls in the way. There are some things that prevent us from attaining them. And one of these things that we talked about before is procrastination. So let me show you an excerpt from a video. This is, you know where I'm going now, but this is by a very smart and well-known psychologist. And she talks here about the problem many of us face, procrastination.
I'm stalling. I have a problem with procrastination, and I'm supposed to start the show, and I'm not. So this procrastination thing, whenever there's something I'm supposed to do, I'll do anything other than the one thing that I'm supposed to do, and then I feel bad about myself, and then I get depressed, and then I really don't get anything done because I'm depressed. And I told a friend of mine about this problem, and she said, you should go to therapy. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, wait a minute, why should I pay a stranger to listen to me talk when I can get strangers to pay to listen to me talk? So that's when I came up with the idea of touring, and I thought, now I have to write a show. So I thought, what do I want to say? What do I want to talk about? So I sat down at my desk, and I was staring at my desk, and I thought, wow, that's dusty. I can't write with my desk all dusty like this. So I went downstairs to get a rag, and on the way downstairs, my kitten was on the stairway playing with a piece of dust or something, and I went to pet the kitten, because they did the thing where they roll on their back and show you the belly, and you got to reward that. You can't pass that up. So I sat down, I was petting the cat for about, 45 minutes, something like that. And then I went downstairs, and by that time I'd forgotten why I went downstairs. And I was staring around trying to remember, and I thought, I should paint this room. The phone rang, and it was a friend of mine. I said, I can't talk, I'm writing. And so she said, I can't believe you, you're so disciplined. I have such a problem with procrastination. And I said, well, we should go to lunch and talk about that. So we went to lunch, and we were talking about procrastination, and the waitress overheard us, and she said, I have a problem with procrastination too. I said, really? Get my sandwich. And but that's when it hit me, that's what I should talk about, procrastination. That's a problem everybody has. That's universal, procrastination. And then I said, oh, who am I kidding? I'm never going to get around to writing about procrastination.
We're going to visit her classroom a couple more times today. So, procrastination. It's a problem all mammals face. You know that 70% of college students label themselves as procrastinators? Hard to believe, right? But it's true. And that's not good, because procrastination, or one's perception of oneself as a procrastinator, leads to unhappiness. It leads to poor sleep, to stress, and to a weakened immune system. That's not good. Fortunately, though, and here is the good news, there is research on procrastination. In fact, there is a research group on procrastination in Carleton University up in Ottawa. And they actually get work done. And interesting work done. So I went to their website. You should Google them. I went to their website and I found pictures of their conference. And here are some of the pictures that I found of their conference on procrastination. So when they arrived, they got together, and after they got together, they ate together. And you know what? After they ate together, they hung out. And after hanging out, they were hungry, so they ate together. They had dinner, and then they went to sleep, and then they ate again. They had a marvelous time. And then after a productive seminar conference in which they practiced what they teach, they got together for a group photograph. But you know, actually, some very interesting research comes out of this research group and other groups. So let me share with you some of it. Overcoming procrastination. The first thing is what they call the 5-minute takeoff. The 5-minute takeoff. Because, you know, how many people here, I want a show of hands, how many people here think that in order to start working, they have to be in the right mood, they have to feel like doing it, and once they feel like doing it, that's when they're really going to get things done? How many people other than me think that? All right, most people think that, but that's not the case. What they have shown is that if we wait to feel that we're in the right mood to start working, we're less likely to start working. We're less likely to start feeling like we want to start working also. So what they suggest is just jumping into it, what they call the first 5 minute, the trigger. And once you jump into it, very often then you get the energy. It becomes a self-reinforcing loop. Remember the model that we talked about, the relationship between behaviors and attitudes? When we wait to feel the right way, we're trying to influence our attitudes directly. Don't wait. Work on the behavior, and behavior will influence our attitudes. Now, some of you may have noticed by now, you know, we've known each other for a few months. I love positive psychology. You may have noticed that. One person noticed it. But you know, sometimes I don't feel like working on it. When I have to write a lecture, very often I procrastinate. But then what I do is I get into it. I jump into it, because I know if I wait to feel like I want to do it, it's going to be too late. So I just jump into it, and within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes, I'm experiencing flow. It's an illusion that we need to first feel good in order to get the work done. So that's the first tip. The second tip, reward yourself. Tell yourself that, well, if I work for 2 hours now, at the end of it, I'll have a phone conversation with my best friend. Or if I get a lot of work done today and tomorrow, then I'll have a lot of free time over the weekend. Simple rewards that actually work. Go public. Declare what you're going to do. One of the things that helped me procrastinate less was when I committed to teaching 1504 and 1508. I had to work. I had to prepare it. I had to be prepared for class to deliver the lectures. I went public. I couldn't go back. We're much better at going back on our word when we only commit to ourselves. But very often external goals actually can inspire us to get more work done. And then when we have these goals, we're more likely to experience flow, to be liberated, to enjoy the process. The team approach. Get help. Do it with people. A lot of research that we'll talk about when we talk about exercising shows that we are much more likely to persist in exercise, even if we know that it's good for us, and most people know that it's good for them. We're much more likely to persist if we do it with other people, if we have a support group, if we go to yoga with friends, if we go to the Mac with our roommate, and we make, again, a public commitment to go together. Finally, goals, plans, and lists actually work. We talked about it earlier. If you actually write the things down and you have to-do lists, and you look at them once in a while, they actually work. Not perfect, but it's one of the things that people who want to overcome procrastination have done, and have done successfully. Now, you look at this list and you say, I know it. Pretty straightforward. Again, the difficulty is not in understanding it. The difficulty is not in knowing it. The difficulty comes in applying it. So the next time you don't feel like doing something and you know you should be doing it, just jump into it. It may take you a minute to get into it. It may take you 20. But just do it. There's an issue here though. And the issue is that we can also do too much. We talked about, remember when we talked about the research on creativity, that there is value to recreation, that etymologically and metaphysically, creation and recreation are connected. So we can go overboard and say to ourselves, well, I'm not going to procrastinate at all, interpret it as I'm not going to take any free time because I have so much to do. There's a thin line, an Aristotelian golden mean, between doing too little, where we procrastinate too much, and doing too much, when we don't take enough free time. And I want to summon again Ellen DeGeneres to help us find that thin line, to show the other extreme and what we need to avoid.
We're doing all these things to squeeze things together so we can save time. And I don't know about you, but I don't have any more time. I have less time. But let's just say we could save up a whole chunk of time and set it aside. You know what we do with it? Nothing. Nothing at all. Isn't that the point, to be able to do nothing at all? But we're not guaranteed that later on chunk of time. All we have is here and now. And that's why procrastination feels so right. Procrastination is not the problem. It is the solution. It is the universe's way of saying, stop, slow down, you move too fast. Listen to the music. Whoa, whoa, listen to the music. What I'm trying to say is, if you leave here tonight and you don't remember anything else that I said, leave here and remember this. Procrastinate now. Don't put it off.
Thin line. So when is it too much procrastination? When is it no free time at all? Let me make a case now for the other side. So I made a case for not procrastinating. Again, negative consequences. Research shows it. We experience it ourselves. We're unhappy when we procrastinate. But on the other hand, there's also a danger of going overboard. Let me talk a little bit about the overboard and the importance of taking time out. Remember at the beginning, the second lecture, we talked about research done by Richard Caddison, who is the head of mental health here at Harvard. And here is what he wrote in his article in the New England Journal of Medicine, just recently. In a recent national survey of 13,500 college students, nearly 45% reported being so depressed that they had difficulty functioning, and 94% reported feeling overwhelmed by everything they had to do. What Caddison is doing here is making a link, implicit and later explicit, between our feeling overwhelmed, having too much to do, and so many college students feeling depressed. 45% of people experiencing what is, for many people, the best years of their lives, or supposed to be, and by the way, another pressure, be happy. If you're not happy, there must be something wrong with you, right? Another pressure to make us unhappy, instead of giving ourselves the permission to be human. But what he's saying is that 45% of college students nationwide experience depression to the point of not functioning. There's something wrong, not on the level of the individual, there's something wrong on the societal level, on the level of the system. And what I argue is wrong is that our society tries to get people to do more and more in less and less. More and more stuff in less and less time. Here is a model that I suggest. We have too much to do. When we have too much to do, we feel stress, overwhelmed. What is it? 94% of college students. Again, I don't think the numbers are much lower when you get out of college in our rat race culture. As a result of feeling overwhelmed, we're also more likely to experience depression. Again, not everyone. Some people thrive on having quote-unquote too much to do. But for most people, for many people, it leads to feelings of depression. So what do we need to do? We need to work on the mediator. We need to work on the stress issue. We need to work on being overwhelmed. You see, because our nature is not constituted, as I'll argue in a minute, to do too much, to do, or rather to do as much as we're doing today. And what I propose is that we incorporate another disorder in the DSM-4, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Psychological Disorders. And the psychologist who proposes this new disorder is once again Ellen DeGeneres, for the last time today.
I believe that someday sitcoms will be 30 seconds long. Because that's all we'll need, and that's all our attention span can take, because our attention span is shot. We've all got attention deficit disorder, or ADD, or OCD, or one of these disorders with 3 letters, because we don't have the time and patience to pronounce the entire disorder. That should be a disorder right there. TBD, too busy disorder. The weather is actually the happiest part of the news, because at some point you're going to hear something positive. You're going to hear, it's a beautiful day, or it's going to be a beautiful day. And it's nice to take in something positive, you know, because we hear all this negative stuff all the time, and we go out into the world and it's so chaotic, and we're not that we're going to notice if it's a beautiful day, we're moving too fast to even pay attention to that. And we need help to keep up with that pace, so we put a coffee shop here, and there's a coffee shop here, and a coffee shop here, and a coffee shop here, and the smallest coffee is a tall, and I'll have a coffee and a side of Red Bull, because I'm very, very busy. I've got TBD and I'm late for yoga. Hurry, hurry!
You see, whenever you see a phenomenon like 45% of college students or 94% of college students, it's no longer an individual issue. It's a society-wide issue. It's a system issue. And we need to address this issue. How do we start? By looking inside, by looking at ourselves. As the generous said, we don't have time to enjoy the here and now. We don't have time to enjoy the beauty that's all around us. And that's not right. That's not right. Yes, that is one day in July. But seriously, how often do we take the time to express gratitude? How often do we take the time to look at the trees? Or to look at the green grass before graduation? How often do we take that? It's not natural, it's not right. Can you imagine? Think about the animal world. Again, we're members of the animal world. Can you imagine a lion working for McKinsey or JP Morgan? Or can you imagine a lion being on the racetrack in academia, publishing or perishing? A lion would not survive that because we weren't made to be that way. We weren't made to be in the rat race. Not even rats were made to be in the rat race. Can you imagine a lion at Harvard? You know, it wouldn't have time to yawn like this and to rest. There's no time. Coffee, Red Bull, right now. I have a class, I have a midterm, I have a paper. Or can you imagine a lion on campus where there is no time to play, to recreate? Animals and human beings, being part of the animal world, need time to recreate. We need time to rest. It's just not natural. Now, the difference between us and the other animals is that we have a choice. We can choose to adhere to our nature, or we can choose to go against our nature. Let's rewind a little bit to this third or fourth lecture of the semester. Remember Thomas Sowell about the constraint vision and the unconstrained vision of reality. The constraint vision says that our nature is the way it is. We need to accept it. Francis Bacon, nature to be commanded must be obeyed. The unconstrained vision says, no, our nature is not perfect, it's not great, and we're going to perfect it. We're going to change our nature. And what I argued then and I'm arguing now is that if we live according to the unconstrained vision of human nature, we're going to pay a price. Just like we're going to pay a price if we don't accept nature as inevitable, as metaphysical, as there. And when we deprive ourselves of sleep, when we deprive ourselves of recreation, and saying, well, I can live a 4 hour of sleep a night. I don't need the 8. I don't need to recreate. I'll leave that for the summer, maybe. When we go against our nature, we pay a price. And the price comes in the form of unhappiness, of feeling overwhelmed, of higher levels of depression, and ultimately, in the long run, of being less successful. Nature to be commanded must be obeyed. These are human needs. So what's the solution? What do we do? Fortunately, there is something we can do. And that is the most important advice that I can give you. And the advice is to simplify. Especially in our modern world, especially in the rat race. Back in the 1800s, Thoreau said that life is too short to be in a hurry. And here is what he admonishes us to do. Life is too short to be in a hurry. He admonishes us to do less, not more. And I'll give you the quote in a few minutes. In other words, if we are to enjoy the leaf, if we are to enjoy the trees, if we are to enjoy our friends as much as we potentially can, we need to do less. It affects every area of our lives, including our love life. In the Handbook of Positive Psychology, Susan and Clyde Hendrick, researchers, love and sex are affected negatively by stress. If we can help people to simplify their lives, thus reducing their stress levels, it is very likely that people's relationships would be enriched greatly. Moreover, the positive aspects of their lives would be enriched accordingly. It influences every area of our life, whether it's our intimate relationships, whether it's our experience of school, of reading, of watching movies, if we simplify, because the quantity affects the quality. How do we simplify? There are various ways. One of them is to say yes by saying no. We get many opportunities here as undergrads to belong to other clubs, to take more great courses. But very often if we say no, even to opportunities that seem great, that we say, how can I turn this down? Ultimately, by saying no to it, we're saying yes to ourselves. When it comes to both how well we perform, how successful we are in the long run, and how happy we are in the ultimate currency. You see, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. 2 years ago, I was teaching a tutorial, which I love. I was writing op-eds, which I love doing. I was consulting for organizations, which I enjoyed tremendously. But I was unhappy. I was unhappy because I was doing too much. Even though each discrete activity in and of itself is something that I really want to do, still overall I was not happy because I had too much. And the semester after, I simplified. I continued teaching, but I didn't write that semester, and I did very little consulting. And I was happy, or much happier than I was the semester before. It's like chocolate. Now, many people like chocolate, but have 2 pounds of chocolate a day, and it's not as good anymore. Quantity affects quality. And what we want to find is the optimum levels of simplicity. Again, going to the Aristotelian golden mean. We want to find the optimum levels of simplicity. And here is what it looks like. Let's say on this axis we have happiness, creativity, and performance. Happiness, creativity, and performance. And here we have number of activities. The way the graph looks is curvilinear. Or if we do too little, we're unhappy, we're not creative, and we're not performing at our best. If we do too much, we're also not happy, we're not creative. We can be great mechanics. Remember the creativity lecture. We can be great mechanics, but not highly creative when we do too much, when we don't have free time, and our performance in the long run goes down. What we are looking for is the optimum level of busyness. This is TBD. This is procrastination. This is anxiety. This is boredom. This is flow, the optimum level. Can you see the relationship between these two graphs? These two theories? The reason why, when we do too little, we also pay a price is because, in the words of Parkinson, work expands to fill the time available for its completion. Just like gases would fill up the space that they're given, the same with work. If we have too little, we'll find time to much more time to procrastinate. On the other hand, If we do too much, I can do a year's work in 9 months, but not in 12. Remember J.P. Morgan. If we do too much, we lose our creativity. We need to find the optimum between the two. For every person, it's different. For some people here, they can handle, consulting, teaching, and writing easily. They love it. They thrive on it. For me, it was too much. For some people, just one activity at a time is the optimum. And that's fine. There is no right and wrong here. And the only way to find out what's your optimum, where you are at your peak experience and peak performance, i.e. at flow, is by trial and error. According to which currency? According to the currency of happiness. Am I happy doing what I'm doing? If not, maybe I should do a bit more. Maybe I should do a bit less. Thoreau. Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. I say let your affairs be as 2 or 3 and not 100 or 1,000. Instead of 1,000,000, count half a dozen. In the midst of this chopping sea of civilized life, such are the clouds and storms and quicksands and the 1,001 items to be allowed for, that a man has to live, if he would not founder and go to the bottom and not make his port at all, by dead reckoning, and he must be a great calculator indeed who succeeds. Simplify, simplify. There was, in the 1840s, how much more complicated are our lives today? This is even more important today than it was then. Take it to heart. Life is too short to be in a hurry. And the steps we need to take in order to simplify is first, identify our want-tos as opposed to our have-tos. And once we identify our want-tos, our self-concordant goals, that's when we ask ourselves, okay, so out of these, what do I really, really want to do? Ask ourselves, how can I make more of my life a self-concordant life? It may just be an hour or 2 a week initially, but try and build up, try and expand this time. But it's a real challenge to do that. It's a real challenge to simplify our lives. And it's a real challenge for various reasons, and one of the reasons we talked about before. Remember the Professor Langer study about change and why for some people it's difficult to change? Because they perceive the other side of the characteristic that they want to change as something positive. So yeah, I want to overcome my perfectionism, but I don't want to stop being ambitious. Yes, I want to overcome my TBD. I want to overcome the too busyness, but I don't want to give up the edge. I don't want to be a slacker. I don't want to be a procrastinator. So the other side of simplicity is actually something, or simplifying, is something that we don't want to give up. And the reason why it's so difficult for us to give up and to say no to things that we're offered, to opportunities that we're given, is because we've all ingested, or most of us have ingested, material perception. The next part of the lecture will be much more philosophical than usual, but this is such an important point. And I want to go now to society at large, because society at large has ingested material perception. It came with the scientific revolution. Now, the scientific revolution brought a lot of wonderful things to the world. Whether it's life expectancy, health, technology, ease. Today the average person can live like kings and queens lived only 100 years ago. So there's clearly a benefit to the scientific revolution, but there's nothing that's perfectly good, nothing that's perfectly bad. And there are also disadvantages, because one of the things that the scientific revolution has taught us is that material is the highest end. It has separated the material from the spiritual. And that's sometimes good, sometimes not. When is it good? For instance, we no longer rely on the concoction made by the witch doctor, we have penicillin. That's thanks to the scientific revolution. That's wonderful. We no longer think that our world rests on a turtle, on top of a turtle, on top of another turtle, ad infinitum. We know that the earth revolves around the sun. We also don't put up a statue and pray to it to grow plants. We cultivate the land. This is a good thing, but there's also a downside, and that is the material perception, in which we perceive the material as the most important thing. Lawrence Bolt, in the book Zen and the Art of Making a Living, society tells us that the only thing that matters is matter. The only things that count are the things that can be counted. Going away from the spiritual. And we see this in many areas. Let me give you just 3 examples where we see it. One area is that we count our activities. The more we do, the better. If we have 5 courses rather than 4 courses, that's better. If we have 6 courses rather than 5, that's the best. I was a business tutor for a few years in Leverett House, where I was a resident tutor. And I screened resumes, and they're remarkable. But they're getting longer and longer every year. It's quite amazing what you ladies and gentlemen are able to fit in 20 years. It's remarkable. The question is, are you here, or are you like the 94% of college students countrywide who feel overwhelmed and therefore compromising, certainly on the ultimate currency, but also long-term success? In academia, counting publications, the publish or perish. Quantity more important, or at least as important as quality. You know that William James would not get tenure today? Not even in his building. Why? He only published 4 articles. Not enough. He changed the face of psychology, but statistical significance, quantifiable, has become more important than conceptual significance, which is more spiritual, or of the spirit. Finally, counting money. There is an obsession with material wealth today. Absolute obsession, where that becomes, for many people, the highest end. Before I continue, I just want to make a disclaimer here. Very often when I discuss these issues, and I discuss them often because I think they're so important, very often when I discuss it, I'm misunderstood. So I want to make this disclaimer. You may disagree with my disclaimer, and that's perfectly fine. But I need to make it because I don't want to be misunderstood on such an important topic. What I'm saying here is not an attack on the scientific revolution. It's not an attack on science. It is also not an attack, and again, this is where I'm misunderstood. It is not an attack on capitalism. I support capitalism. I strongly support capitalism. I agree with Winston Churchill, who said that the inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. The inherent virtue of socialism is the equal sharing of miseries. So I agree with that. However, what I also understand is that there is a downside even to capitalism, because through it we have ingested material perception. And that perception is making many people unhappy.